There's a wall in the basement bedroom where I grew up. Just a regular wall, painted magnolia, with a built-in bookshelf stretching from the floor almost to the ceiling. It was there when we moved in. My dad said it was a nice feature, saved us buying furniture. I filled those shelves with books, video games, a few trophies. I used to fall asleep every night staring at the spines of those novels. I lived in that basement room for months. Slept there every single night. Changed my clothes there. Did my homework there. Had private phone calls. Had arguments with my parents that I didn't want them to hear. I felt completely alone in that room. I was not alone in that room. On the other side of that bookshelf, just a few inches of wall between us, someone had made a home. They had food, and a blade, and a cup they'd taken from our kitchen. And they had been there for a very long time. And in the wall, positioned at exactly the right height, there was a hole. Small. Deliberate. Aimed directly at my bed. Someone had been watching me sleep. For months. This is a true story. It happened to me when I was 15 years old. And I want to tell it to you exactly as I remember it, because even after all these years, there are parts of it I still don't fully understand. Parts that keep me up at night. And the part that frightens me most? My parents still live in that house. To understand any of this, I need to take you back to the winter I turned 15. It was mid-January. One of those mornings where the cold has a texture to it, where the air stings the inside of your nose and every exhale hangs in front of you like a ghost. My family had been living in a two-bedroom apartment in a quiet suburb of Saskatoon for most of my childhood. It was fine, perfectly fine, but we were out of space, and with my baby sister arriving in a matter of weeks, fine wasn't going to cut it anymore. So we started looking for a house. Now, I should explain something about my family. We were not wealthy. We were the kind of family where birthday presents were carefully budgeted and holidays were road trips, not flights. So when my dad found a 3-bedroom house on Whitmore Street selling for a price that made my mom raise her eyebrows and say, "That can't be right," we paid attention. And it was right. It was really that cheap. It wasn't hard to see why when we visited. The house was older. Built sometime in the 60s, the estate agent reckoned, and it showed. The wallpaper in the hallway was peeling at the corners. The kitchen needed updating. The front garden was more mud than lawn. And the basement, which was technically a 3rd bedroom, the whole reason we were interested, was in poor shape. Damp patches in the corners, a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in years, and a musty, closed-in smell that took a few minutes to get used to. But the bones were good, my dad said. And for the price? We could make it ours. He spent the first few weeks throwing himself into the renovation. He was practical that way, the kind of man who'd rather fix something himself than pay someone else to do it. He cleaned the basement top to bottom, laid new carpet, sorted out the bathroom, replaced a couple of the structural beams that had seen better days, and put up fresh wallpaper. He even let me choose the pattern. Something geometric in dark blue and white that I thought looked incredibly cool at 15 and would probably cringe at now. The basement became my domain. My own space. My room. I moved in my bed, my desk, my bookshelves, my gaming setup. I stuck posters on the walls. It felt like growing up. For the first 2 months, everything was great. Until the night of my dad's birthday changed everything. My dad turned 44 in late February. We went out for dinner to celebrate. A little Italian place in town that we all loved. The kind of restaurant where the bread basket arrives before you've even sat down properly. It was a genuinely lovely evening. My mom was 8 months pregnant and tired, but she was glowing. My dad was in a good mood. I ate an unreasonable amount of tiramisu. We pulled back onto Whitmore Street just after 9:30. And our front door was open. Not just unlocked. Open. Standing wide, a rectangle of darkness where there should have been a closed door. The porch light was on and we could see from the car that things inside the hallway had been disturbed. My mom's face went pale. She grabbed my arm. My dad told us to stay in the car and call the police. I want to say we argued with him, but we didn't. We were too scared. We watched him get out, reach into the back of the truck for the large wrench he kept in his toolbox, and walk up the front path and through that open door into the dark. The 5 minutes we sat in that car waiting for the police to arrive were 5 of the longest minutes of my life. My mom was on the phone with the dispatcher, her voice barely above a whisper. I had my hand on the door handle, genuinely unsure whether to run toward the house or further away from it. My heart was doing something uncomfortable in my chest. The police arrived. 2 officers. They went in with flashlights. 10 minutes later, they came back out with my dad. Nothing stolen. No one inside. But, and this is the detail that never sat right with me, things had been moved. Specifically, the books on my bedroom shelf downstairs. Several of them were pulled forward, like someone had been running their fingers along the spines. Or reaching behind them. We were shaken but relieved. The police suggested someone had possibly tried the door, found it open, and panicked when they realized the place wasn't empty after all. We accepted this. What else were we going to do? We went inside. We locked the door. We went to bed. From that night onward, I started hearing things. Not every night. Not even every week. But often enough that it registered. Little sounds from inside the walls, soft knocking, or a faint scraping, something that moved irregularly, nothing like the constant rhythm of water in pipes. I told myself it was the pipes. It was an old house. Old houses make noise. I genuinely believed that. But then one night in early March, it must have been around 2 in the morning. I was under my duvet playing my old handheld gaming console, screen dimmed right down, volume off, doing everything a 15-year-old does to avoid their parents knowing they're still awake. And I heard it. Laughter. Not from upstairs. Not from outside. From the wall. Directly to my left, about level with where my head was on the pillow. A low, soft, unmistakably human laugh. Like someone had heard something quietly amusing and hadn't quite managed to keep it in. I didn't move. I think my entire body stopped functioning for a few seconds. The gaming console slipped sideways in my hands. I lay there completely rigid for what must have been 30 minutes. Listening. Waiting. Trying to breathe quietly. Nothing else came. Eventually, I convinced myself it was exhaustion. Sleep deprivation does strange things to your hearing. I'd read that somewhere. I switched off the console. I closed my eyes. I went to sleep. I did not tell my parents. And that, looking back, was the moment I should have. My baby sister Clara was born on a Thursday in March. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and the loudest cry I'd ever heard from something so small. I was besotted with her immediately, which surprised me. I'd been fairly nervous about the idea of a baby sibling. But the moment they put her in my arms in that hospital room, something clicked. A few weeks after they brought her home, a practical problem arose. My parents' bedroom was on the first floor, and the crib they'd set up in the corner was too close to their bed for comfortable sleep for any of them. My mum was waking at every tiny sound Clara made, and Clara made a lot of sounds. My mum had an idea. The basement bedroom was large, easily big enough for a cot in the corner. And she trusted me. If Clara shared my room with a baby monitor between us and one upstairs, I could alert my parents if anything was wrong during the night, and they'd actually get some rest. I agreed without hesitation. Clara was my sister. Of course I'd keep her safe. I want you to hold on to that thought. Because the night this story breaks open, it breaks open because Clara was in that room. It was a Friday night in April. My parents had gone out for a late dinner, their first proper evening out since Clara was born. They deserved it. I was 16 weeks into being an accidental night nurse and I told them to go, have a good time, I'd hold the fort. I made myself comfortable in the living room with a film. Clara was asleep downstairs. Both baby monitors were working. I could hear the soft, static hush of her breathing from the unit on the coffee table. Everything was peaceful. Around 20 minutes into the film I got up to grab something from the kitchen. That's when I heard it through the monitor on the counter. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. The unmistakable sound of someone moving across the basement floor. I stood completely still in the kitchen, both hands on the counter, staring at the monitor. My brain cycled through explanations at speed. The sound of the film carrying through the floor. Water in the pipes expanding. An animal somehow getting in. And then Clara started crying. Not the gentle, half-asleep whimper she did when she stirred. A proper, startled cry, the kind that means she'd been woken up suddenly. And then, through the monitor, faint but absolutely, definitively there. A human voice. Soft. Deliberate. And then a crash. I don't remember making a conscious decision. My body just moved. I went upstairs to my parents' room. I knew where my dad kept his rifle, locked in the wardrobe, trigger lock engaged, ammunition stored separately in a box I didn't have access to. I couldn't load it. I couldn't even really use it. But whoever was in my basement didn't know that. I carried it downstairs with both hands, hiding the trigger lock as best I could with my palm, trying to look like someone who absolutely knew what they were doing and absolutely did not. I stood outside the basement door for what felt like a very long time. Then I opened it. Walked down the stairs. Turned to face the room. Clara's cot was in the corner. She was still crying. No one was standing over her. No one was visible anywhere in the room. I called out. My voice much steadier than I felt, I'm armed. Come out now, or I'm going to find you. I said it twice. The second time, my voice wavered slightly. Nothing. No movement. No sound except Clara. I crossed to the cot, scooped her up with one arm, kept the rifle in my other hand, and walked back up those stairs without turning my back to the room. I wedged a dining chair under the basement door handle. I called my parents. Then I called the emergency line. The police arrived before my parents did, 2 officers who were patient and kind and took me seriously, which I appreciated. They sat me in the back of their car with Clara until my parents arrived, then one of the officers went inside while the other stayed with us. My parents pulled up looking absolutely terrified. I told them everything, the footsteps, the voice on the monitor, the crash. My mum held Clara so tightly that Clara started fussing again. The officer came back out. Same report as the last time. No one in the house. No signs of entry. And then my dad, who'd been very quiet through all of this, asked a question that confused everyone present. He asked if they'd checked behind the bookshelf. The officer looked at him. I looked at him. What do you mean, behind it? The officer asked. My dad said, when I was doing the renovation, I noticed the bookshelf down there isn't attached to the wall. It was like that when we moved in. I always meant to fix it properly but I hadn't gotten around to it. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then the officer asked my dad to come inside and show him. I want to be precise about what we found, because I've told this story before and people sometimes assume I'm exaggerating. I am not exaggerating. When we went downstairs, me, my dad, and the officer, the bookshelf was already slightly ajar. Not all the way. Not dramatically. Just a few inches, like a door that hasn't been pulled fully closed. The same books that had been moved the night of my dad's birthday were still slightly displaced. The basement window on the far side of the room, which should have been latched shut, was open fully. And positioned directly below it, as a step, was my own desk chair. Someone had used it to climb out. While we were standing outside talking to the police. While my mum was holding Clara. While I was sitting in the back of that patrol car, I was watching the front of the house. But no one was watching the back. The officer pushed the bookshelf open fully. Behind it was a room. Not a large room. Maybe 4 feet deep and roughly 6 feet wide, running along the length of the wall. The kind of space that might have been a utility corridor when the house was first built, accessible through a panel that had at some point been disguised as fitted shelving. There were pipes along 2 walls. A water meter. Old wiring. And on the floor, food wrappers. Several of them, different brands, different foods, the kind of thing someone accumulates over weeks, not days. One of our cups. A blue ceramic mug my mom had noticed was missing about a month ago and assumed she'd accidentally thrown away. A half-empty bottle of hand lotion. A folding knife. Switchblade style. Closed, but there. And an apple. Partially eaten, core browning at the edges, but the flesh still pale. Still fresh. They hadn't left long ago. The officer crouched down and looked at everything without touching it. He was very calm, which somehow made it worse. He told us what we already understood but hadn't yet fully processed. Someone had been living in this room. Not for a night. Not for a few days. Based on the accumulation of wrappers, the wear marks on the floor, the quantity of items, for weeks. Possibly months. For as long as we had lived in that house. The police took photographs, documented everything, and told us that whoever had been there almost certainly was not coming back. Now that we knew about the space, the element of secrecy was gone. They sealed the bookshelf from our side with a bolt and told us to call immediately if anything felt wrong. We spent that night at my aunt's house. And the night after. It took a few days before my parents felt comfortable returning, and even then, we kept the basement door locked from the top of the stairs at all times. But I couldn't stop thinking about that room. There was something unresolved in my mind. A question I couldn't shake. I'd lived on the other side of that wall every night. Sleeping. Getting dressed. Playing games. Being a 15-year-old kid who thought he had privacy. How much had they seen? About a week after everything happened, while my parents were both upstairs, I went down to the basement. I unlatched the bolt. I pushed the bookshelf open. I went inside. The room had been cleared out by the police, so the floor was empty. But the walls were still there. And I walked them inch by inch with my torch, looking for I wasn't sure what. I found it about 2/3 of the way along the wall that backed onto my bedroom. A hole. Small, maybe the diameter of a coin. Drilled cleanly, edges smooth. Not an accident. Not a crack. Deliberate. I leaned down to look through it from the other side. It pointed directly at my bed. Not approximately. Not roughly. Precisely. Whoever had drilled it had positioned it carefully, at exactly the right height, at exactly the right angle, to have a clear line of sight to where I slept every night. They hadn't just been living in that room. They had been watching me. I came back out of the room, relatched the bolt, sat down on my bed, and didn't move for a very long time. I've thought about it in the years since, tried to rationalize it, tried to understand what kind of person ends up hiding inside a stranger's house, burrowed into the dark on the other side of a bookshelf. Were they there before we moved in? Did they follow us? Did our dad's renovation disturb them and they adapted? Did they lie low during the day and only move at night, which explained the midnight sounds, the creaking, the laugh I heard from the wall? And the question I'll never have an answer to, what were they planning? The knife. The watching. The patience. What were they waiting for? The investigation didn't go far. No fingerprints that led anywhere useful. No confirmed identity. The DNA evidence they collected apparently matched no one in the system. A detective came to the house about 10 days later. He sat with my parents at the kitchen table and ran through what they knew, which wasn't much. He said their working theory was that the person had been using the space as a squat, essentially an informal shelter, and that the knife was likely defensive, carried for their own protection rather than as a threat to us. I remember sitting in the doorway of the kitchen, listening to this, and feeling a very particular kind of cold. Because defensive or not, that knife was a few inches of wall and a bookshelf away from my sleeping baby sister. And from me. He told my parents there was no indication the individual planned to return. He told them to get the wall sealed properly, which my dad did, with a steel-backed panel and a padlock. And then the detective left. And that was more or less the end of the official involvement. We never found out who it was. I'm 21 now. I share a flat with my partner in a different part of the city. I have my own front door, my own locks, my own space. But my parents are still on Whitmore Street. Same house. Same basement. My mom uses the basement for storage now, boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, the kind of stuff that accumulates over years. Nobody sleeps down there anymore. Clara is 5. She's loud and funny and absolutely fearless, which is the opposite of how she entered this story. And sometimes, when I visit my parents on a weekend and I'm sitting in their kitchen having a cup of tea, I'll catch myself looking at the door to the basement. The one that's always closed. The one with the bolt at the top that my dad fitted the day after everything happened. And I'll think about that room on the other side of the bookshelf. Whether the panel is still there, just sealed over. Whether anyone could ever find it again, if they were looking. I don't go down there anymore. I don't have a reason to. But the truth is, even if I did have a reason, I don't think I'd be able to. Some things change the way a space feels to you permanently. And that basement, even now, even years later, feels like a place where someone was watching. Because someone was. I've gone back and forth about whether to tell this story publicly. For a long time it felt too personal, too close, too strange, too hard to explain without sounding like I'm exaggerating. But the reason I wanted to share it is this. We talk a lot about feeling safe at home. Home is supposed to be the one place where you can be completely unguarded. Where you don't have to be alert. Where you close the door and the world stays out. And for 9 months of my life, that wasn't true. Someone else was inside that closed door. Inside those walls. And I had no idea. I don't say that to scare you. I say it because I think about the people who might be in houses like that one right now. The houses that are maybe a little too cheap, a little too old, with a renovation or two still waiting. The strange noises dismissed as pipes. The doors that don't quite fit their frames. I'm not saying it's common. I'm not saying it's likely. But I am saying, when something feels wrong, even quietly, even at 2 in the morning, trust it. If you've had an experience that felt unexplainable, something you saw or heard in a place you thought was safe, I'd genuinely love to hear it in the comments. This community has sent me some extraordinary stories, and I read all of them. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is where true stories like this one live. Subscribe if you want more, and hit the bell. The algorithm varies these videos more than you'd think. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious. Stay safe. And maybe, just maybe, learn a few words in your neighbor's language. You never know when it might matter.